So today we will be covering lesson 1-3. So yeah, regarding the Python class and objects. So basically Python is a language that necessitates the use of class and object. So I'll explain to you what's the meaning of class and what's the meaning of object. So moving on. So this is the formal definition. Yeah. So we can ask what is Python class and then what is an object. So again, the formal definition goes like this. Yeah. A Python class is for defining a particular type of object. Your father's car is an object. So meaning to say, if your car is an object, my handphone is an object, my marker pen is an object, and then I have my mouse here, which is also an object. So that's the idea. And then now the vehicle is a class because just now we already made a statement saying that your father's car is an object, but the class of the object is vehicle. So vehicle is an umbrella term for for a number of objects. Okay, let's say we can have iPhone 13. So let's say maybe you want to define iPhone 13 as the class, and then I have my own iPhone 13, and then you have your own iPhone 13. So it's my iPhone as an object and your iPhone as an object. Even though I do not own any iPhone lah, I'm using a Realme. So maybe Realme GT Master is a model. Okay, it's the model of the phone, the smartphone. But mine, my Realme GT Master is an object, and then maybe you have your own Realme GT Master. That's another object. Okay, any question regarding this? I think this is clear, yeah? So this is the basic definition of class and object. So the question is, how are we going to adapt? How are we going to adopt that kind of idea into our programming? So again, this is just an illustration. Yeah, we have many vehicles. Okay, vehicles is the class, and then we can have many objects here. Maybe we have the fire truck here that belongs to Jabatan Bomba Sungai Dua, and then we have another bomba truck owned by Bomba Sungai Nibong, or things like that, yeah. And then we have the garbage truck. So, but all of these are vehicles. So normally for 1 second, yeah, there's a noise. Okay, normally when we define a vehicle, we can divide that class, which is the vehicle, into two parts, which is the attribute, and then and the second is the functions. So for the attributes, I will go for the attribute first, yeah. So we can have many attributes for the vehicle. We can have, for example, the maker. So which company is the vehicle maker? Maybe it's Volkswagen or Honda or Proton. And then the model. So let's say if the vehicle is Volkswagen, so what will be the model? Maybe Passat or maybe the Polo. Or for example, Proton, we can have Proton Saga or Proton Iswara, Proton X50, X60, things like that. And then we have another attribute, which is the name. So maybe that Proton car belongs to your dad, so it is registered under your dad's name at JPJ. So it should be your father's name lah. For example, maybe it is your car, maybe it is my car, then the name attribute will be Rabi's car, for example. Maybe Hamdan's car. Okay, and then what's the power? So it's for the vehicle's power. Maybe it is so I know values like really bother with the with the with the power of a car. Maybe the transmission or it's manual. So we set this to true if the vehicle uses the stick shift. You know, the manual shifter, or maybe it is an automatic car. And how many number of tires? Maybe the standard vehicle use 4 tires. Most of the vehicles use 4 tires, and then maybe it is a motorcycle, so the number of tires will be 2. And then we also have the functions here. We also have the functions. Okay. Oops. Okay. So for the functions, you can also have a set of work that needs to be done, that can be done by the class. For example, for a vehicle, it can move forward, it can move backwards, you can steer left, steer right, and shift up. This is for manual car, okay? And then next, we can also have another example, which is the game player. So as you know, the PUBG characters. So for the game player, we can divide the player into 2, which is the attributes, and another one is the function. You have, let's say if you are playing PUBG, and then there will be 100 players in one round. So there are 100 players will possess the specific attributes for your name and where is your spawn location, whether it is an SMG, I mean the submachine guns or the rifles, okay, and secondary weapon, or the life. This will be a float number, maybe it's 100%, or maybe maybe you fell from a cliff. I mean during when you spawn and then you fell from a cliff, then you begin with 50%, for example. And the back capacity, this is just an example. So that's the attributes of the player. And then next, on the functions, of course, the player can run, walk, jump, die, and get hit. And then when it is dying, I mean, the programmer must animate the player dying and play the R voice, things like that, lah. Okay. So that's the idea. So next, of course, a class is more general. So a class, maybe it is the vehicle, your smartphones, the game player, or maybe you can have any classification. For example, the human. So I am a human, but me myself is a specific human. So I got my own names. I got my own health condition, and then maybe your health is much so here are the objects. So for the vehicles, maybe the Boon's lorry, mom's car, James' motorcycle, Hanim's bicycle, dad's smartphones, and etc. So an object is more specific. So yeah, we have discussed this before. So for example, here, mom's car is a vehicle. So you are telling your Python that you are creating a variable, a mom's car, and then you have created an object, and then you assign the class of the object. So here your object variable name is mom's underscore car, and then you set the variables into the vehicle class, and then you access the attributes. This is the dot operator. So whenever you want to access the attributes and the functions, you have to use the dot operator immediately after the variable here. Okay. So here we have mom's car dot maker. And then you are setting the variable maker here. You are setting the attribute here as Volkswagen. And then momscar.model, which is Passat. Okay. And then momscar.name. Maybe your mom's name is Maimunah, so you just name the car as Maimunah car. And then moms_car.power is 200 kilo horsepower. And then your mom's car dot is manual. Then you set this to false because most Volkswagen cars are automatic. Mom's car dot tires, which equals to 4. And then you want to execute, and then maybe you want to simulate. You want to create. To simulate, for example, when your mom press the pedal so that the car moves forward, then it is quite, it can be regarded as momscar.move forward. Maybe it is a function provided by Volkswagen. So whenever you press the throttle pedal, tekan minyak, you press the throttle pedal, and then there's a wire under the throttle pedal, goes to the computer in the car. There's a small computer in the car, and then in the computer, in the computer's car, the manufacturer has all these can move. So mom pedal, and then it will connect to the electrical wiring into the computer. Move an example, yeah, just an example. Any questions so far? So, okay. So no question, yeah? All right. So that's all about the concept here of object and class. So it is pretty a simple concept. Okay, it is a pretty simple concept. Now we are going to deal with the actual practical stuff. So in Python, we have a few basic built-in Python classes. We have the bool as the boolean, we have the str as the string, then we have the integer, the float, and the list. So bool is a boolean value. It is either true or false. So make sure that you note that the first character of true and false should be uppercase. Okay. So Python will only detect the uppercase T and uppercase F for true and false respectively. Okay. And then we have the string str, which is a sequence of characters, more or less like a list, but designed only for characters. So it is a list of characters. Yeah. Same goes to this. This is a list. The list here, the elements of the list, the elements are the objects. Okay. The elements are the objects. So you can have a set of objects. You can have as many objects as you wanted to, and then you want to group them together as a list. Maybe the list of students' names, which is a list of string, or maybe a list of cars. Maybe you define your mom's cars and then your brother's car, and then you put these variables into a list. So a list is a collection of objects. Okay. So the string here is more or less like a list, because the string is a list of objects, and the object is, and the objects are characters. Okay, do you get what I mean? So for example here, the sequence. So the word sequence here is a list of characters. So the word sequence itself is a string because it is a list of characters. So I have the character S, character E, Q, U, E, and C, E. So that's the idea. And then, of course, I have mentioned this in our previous class. I've mentioned about the integer number from -infinity towards the positive infinity, but I mean, it is an integer, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. And then we have the float, the real number. So computer scientists call it as a floating point number. It is actually a real number, okay? A real number. So normally we call this as a floating point number. And then in Python, we also have another one, which is the real, and we have the complex. So I will not introduce you to the complex. Maybe you have your own time and then find out the ways of using the complex class. Here we have the float, and then we have another one, complex, which will include the imaginary part and the real part. So that's the idea. But I will not focus on that now, because you are still on your first year. I mean, you're still learning about the complex number. I'm not sure whether you learned this before. Okay, now I'm going to teach you Python grammar number 1. So this is the first syntax, okay? Defining an object in Python. So so suppose that you want to create an object, and then you are representing the object with a variable, and the name of the variable is total underscore price. So the total underscore price wording here is known as the object identifier. So how are you going to, so you can have as many objects as you wanted to, but how are you going to differentiate between them? So of course you have to name them, you have to represent them using the variables. So you have to use the different identifiers for these variables. So this is, for example, we have the total price, total underscore price. So let's say if you want to do your programming and then you want to add more variables, maybe you can use total underscore price 1, total underscore price 2, total underscore price, blah, 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 things like that. But as long as they are different. If you use the same identifier, then it will lead to, I mean, it is grammatically correct in Python, but it will override the object. Later, I'll explain to you about this, yeah? This is the object identifier. So if you want to give the name to the variables, the identifiers can be a combination of letters in lowercase or uppercase, or digits from 0 to 9, or an underscore. So here I have the underscore here. So the thing is, you cannot use the other characters, others that are not listed in the red sentence here. So this is the class identifier. So this is the class name. So note that the parentheses must present. Okay. So the thing is, it is okay if it is not there, but I would say that it is important to put the blank parentheses here. So I mean, the reason why I call it as a blank parenthesis is because there's nothing within the parentheses. Okay. The thing is, because later when you become an experienced Python programmer, you will discover that the parenthesis here is important to initialize your class. So I will not cover that in this particular lesson, because that is considered as an advanced Python class. Because here we are only dealing with so here we are. I mean, our class now is for beginners. So I will not focus on that, because you can also set the initial values of your class. Maybe you want to define a vehicle. For example, you want to create a class. So you declare an object, maybe my car, as a vehicle. And then, of course, you want to initialize your object. Am I right? Maybe you want to initialize with the name my car, and then you want to initialize the makers of the car, maybe the Volkswagen or the BMW, or maybe you want to initialize the name to something else. So that's the initialization. And those initialization should go within the parentheses. But this is something extra, so I will not cover that in this particular class. But I suggest you to put the parentheses. So that's why I put here as a must. But it is okay if you don't put the parentheses, because Python itself is flexible. Okay, you can do your own way whether you want to put the parentheses or not. But the thing is, I am your teacher, and I suggest you to put, because later when you go further in Python programming, you'll discover that, oh, okay, now I know what's the meaning of this. The reason why we need to have this is because we need to pass the initialization. Okay, so this is for your just for your information, yeah. For those who are not able to understand my explanation here, I think it's okay. You can just pass because we will not cover that. Because along the way, when you do your programming, and then when after you complete the ZCE111 course, and then, well, of course, I hope that you will be continuing your programming in Python, and then you will encounter problems, you will encounter future problems, and then you will Google on the internet for the solutions, and then you'll discover that, oh, okay, this is how we pass the initialization. So at least you got the idea, oh, that's the reason why Dr. Rabi'i mentioned that I need to put the parentheses here, because it is a good practice. So meaning to say here, we are defining a blank float number. So the total price is a float, but you still haven't fed any value to it. Do you see what I mean? Okay. Any questions so far? No question, yeah? Okay, never mind. So here is a blank float. Okay. So meaning to say, if you want to initialize to a number, then maybe you have to put your number between the parentheses here. Okay. Yeah, later I'll show you the examples, okay? So of course we have the dot operator now. So Python grammar number 2 or syntax 2, accessing the method of an object in Python. I mean, accessing the method or the attribute. So you have to place the dot operator here, okay? So that you can access the items stored in the total price variable. So this is the method identifier as specified in the class definition. So here in this particular course, I'm not going to train you to create your own class. Maybe you can try to discover this at home. But the thing is, I just want to teach you that Python is a strictly based on the object-oriented programming. This is what we call the object-oriented programming, because we are using the concept of class and object. So whenever you create a class, and then you have to do the programming for that particular class. Okay, whenever you want to, for example, you want to create your own library, you want to create your own class, for example, a new number, which is a rational number, for example. So you declare your new class as rational. Okay, the word rational, which represent a rational number. And then you have to define all of the methods to do the summation, to do the subtraction, to do the multiplication, and then maybe you have to define on how to convert into fractions and whatsoever. So these are the methods that you need to define whenever you want to create your class. So you don't want to make an empty class, okay, which is redundant. Because actually a class helps, a class helps to solve some problem. So, the content of your class must be a set of methods and attributes, okay? So this is the dot operator. So next, suppose that you have already defined your total underscore price as a float. Just now we initialize with a blank float. Am I right? Okay, so previously our total price variable is blank. We know that it is a float, but it does not hold any number. But now we are assigning a value to our variable here. So the total underscore price is equals to 200.30. So this is the assignment operator. This is not the equal sign, yeah? Assignment, you are assigning. Well, it is, we can say that it is an equal sign, but it is something more than the one that we understood in mathematics, okay? It is more than the one that we understood in mathematics. So it does something more in programming. So that's why we call this as the assignment operator. In mathematics, we only use this equal sign here to assign numbers to a variable. But here in programming, you can also assign strings to a variable. You can assign an object to a variable. You can assign something else to the variable. You can assign a list to a variable. So it does more than the one that you have understood in mathematics. Okay. So the thing is, the good news is Python will always help to convert. For example, let's say you declare the total price as a float, but then you are passing 200.3 as a string. So you are not going to assign a string to a float variable. So basically you cannot do that, but Python will help you to convert the string. Python will try to convert the value into a float. Okay. So let's say if you assign total underscore price equals to true, then Python will do something to convert the Boolean true into a number. Things like that. So that's the good thing about Python. So it is a weak type programming language. Weak type. Okay, weak type, not a strong type. Because if you do the programming in C++ or Visual Basic or something other or the other programming languages, then it will lead to error. For example, some of the errors might say you cannot assign string to total price because total price is a float, things like that. But Python will help you to convert. That's the reason why Python is much more acceptable by beginners, by programming beginners. Okay. The thing is, you can always, when you know C++ or the other programming languages, you can do Python programming. But if you only know how to do Python programming, I don't think you can you can program in C++ or the other languages easily. So you have to work from the bottom. So here, I want to tell Python to create a float. Okay. So the total price equals to float. And then you are declaring the total price variable here, but this is optional. Again, I repeat, this is optional. There might be some expert in my class as well. I'm not sure whether maybe some of you guys are the experts of Python. And then he or she might say that, what's the point of having the declaration here? So it is redundant. Well, of course, it is redundant. You can remove the line here. You can remove this. You can just begin with total underscore price. But the thing is, to me, it is unfair if you do that way because in the other programming languages, you have to declare your variable. But in Python, Python are created for beginners. Okay, I mean, Python are focus on the applications. I mean, on its application. It wants to, I don't know how to say it. I think it wants to attract more beginners to use Python. So that's the reason why it is much more easier to use. So here, if you want to, you can just avoid the declaration here. Let's say if I delete this, and then you can directly state that total underscore price is equal to 200.3. But the thing is, I suggest you to declare because it is a good practice. Okay, it is a good practice, and then you will discover why declaring the variable is a good practice later. Maybe once you are becoming an experienced programmer. Well, yeah, that's it. And then if you want to access the built-in methods, for example, the guy who created Python, he also created the class float. So float is a built-in. Whenever you install your Python, then it will always appear. It will always available in your computer. So it is something that you don't have to install. Okay, it is readily available. So the guy who created Python, who also created the float class here, he defined a few methods. For example, the method for the float number is the function here is integer. So if you want to know whether the total price is an integer, the total price is a float. But if, let's say, if I change from 200.30 here, let's say if I change it to 200, so it is an integer, am I right? So it is an exact number, an exact integer. So you ask Python whether it is an integer by simply using the dot operator, and then you have is underscore integer. So you have to use this name, okay? Because it has been created by the guy who created the class here. So he defined the name of the method as is underscore integer. So you cannot use the different name. For example, if you want to remove the underscore here, no, you won't be able to do that. It will lead to error. Okay. So this, for example, here the is underscore integer will return, will tell you whether it's true or false. Okay. So the question here is whether the total price is an integer. So the function here will tell you whether it's true or false, or the method here you can use interchangeably. Okay, whether it's a function or methods. So here you are telling whether total price is an integer or not, and then you want to print the output. So print total price dot is underscore integer. So it will display true or false in the console output. So next, you want to tell Python to create a string, and then you want to concatenate to miscellaneous variables. For example, here I declare the username, user underscore name as a string, and then you assign the string to your variable. For example, here I am assigning the Novoropnoye underscore Milta into the user underscore name. And then here you want to print the username. So your username is, and then you concatenate to the string variable here. So you concatenate to the string variable here, which is the user underscore name. And then, for example, you want to access the methods available for strings. So the guy who created Python, he also created the class string, str. So he defined a few methods. He defined a few methods under the string class. Okay, so one of them is the upper, which will convert the string into the uppercase. So all characters of the string will be uppercase. Okay, and then we also have another one, which is the lower method. So another method which is called the lower. So the lower here will convert the entire characters in the string into the lowercase. So of course you can also access part of the string. So meaning to say, here I have Novoropnoye underscore Milta, and then I say that I want to access only a part of the string, which is from character 1 to character 5. Oh, sorry, from character 2, it should be 1. You have to add 1. From character, so here, get parts of the username, M, and then until N. So it means you are accessing character, you are accessing part of the string from character m+1 until the character n+1. So here you are accessing from character 1+1, which is 2. So it will begin from 1, 2. Okay. It will begin from the O letter here. And then 5 plus 1. So it will become 6. So from 2, character number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So the output will be overall. So you can try to play around with this because I know it's weird. So it works that way. I mean, the Python programmer, he created this like that. So we can't do much. You cannot question me. Why is it m+1? You cannot question me because I'm not the creator. Just like that. Okay. It is what it is. So I can't do much. You know. Okay. So and then you print the output. Okay. For example, here and then next we have maybe you are getting the first character of the username. So the first character of username is username, and then you put the square bracket here 0. Okay. So this is a square bracket here is for accessing a list. So again, I repeat, yeah, this is something important. So you need to know this. You need to know that the square bracket here, the square bracket here. So you have your variable here, and then you have the square bracket. The purpose of the square bracket is to access the list, to access the elements of the list. So here, string is a list of characters. So you want to access the characters, so you have to use the square bracket. But if you want to access the entire string, then you don't need to use the square bracket. You just use the variable itself without any square brackets. Here you are, over here, you are accessing the entire string. Okay. Any questions so far? Let's see whether you got question. No question. Yeah. Okay. And then next, you can also convert from one class to another. So Python is a good guy, you know, not like the other programming languages. For the other programming languages, it is also possible to convert from one class to another. For example, you create two objects, and then the first object has the class of vehicle, and then the other object has the class of car. So of course, car and vehicle are interrelated to each other. They are, of course, car and the vehicle. So vehicle is much more it is even more general, no? And then car is a bit specific. So at some point you define two classes. The first one is car, and then the second is vehicle. But then you can always convert from one to another. But the thing is, the programmer or the guy who created these classes must define the procedure or the method to convert. So this is something that is for the higher level programming, yeah. But the thing is, for your case, the idea is you can always convert an object into a certain class. For example, you ask the user whether it is true or false, and then the user will type in the string true. Well, it is a string, and you can convert the string into the Boolean. So if you say true, then Python will convert from it will convert the wording true into the Boolean true, for example. Okay. Or maybe you have a float number, and then you want to convert into a string. So this is occasionally happens when you want to print a number. So you have to convert the number, which is a float, into a string. So basically, you just put the class name, and then you have the value, the object as the argument. This is an argument, yeah. Argument is the parameter of your function or the parameter of your method. Okay, so normally we call this as the argument. So f of x in mathematics, so f is the function name and x is the argument or the input of your function. So the input of the conversion here will be the class. Let's say if you have a float, then you have to put the float object into here, and then it will automatically convert into Boolean whenever possible. If it is not possible, then it will lead to an error, or it will lead to something I don't know, something crazy. So it depends, yeah. So Python will always try to convert, unlike the other programming languages. Any questions? No. If you got question, you can simply ask me in the chat, okay, or maybe on Telegram. So the thing is, I have also mentioned the error here during our second class. So you cannot, let's say you declare I equals to 100. So you cannot simply concatenate an integer to a string. So what you need to do is you have to convert into a string first, and then you can concatenate to a string. Excuse me. So basically, you can also use integers to evaluate the value of a float. Okay? Because if I have two integers, 5, and then I want to divide 5 by 2, but the thing is, I have to convert the integer number 5 and the integer number 2 into floats. Then I will have the division, the exact divisions, the floating point division. Otherwise, it will do the integer division. So for example, 5 divided by 2, and the answer will be 2 if it is an integer division. It will ignore the decimal places. Okay, so we have two types of divisions. So the first one is the integer division, and the other is the division itself. So it will not, the standard division will not ignore the decimal places. But for the integer division, it will ignore any decimal places. What else? Okay, so this is the idea, yeah? So that's for lesson 1-3. So the thing is, I supposed to cover lesson 1-4 as well for this particular class. But the thing is, in my exercise 0 questions, the last question is asking you to evaluate the root mean square. So you have to multiply V0 with the 1 over square root 2. Okay? So now, maybe when you go back, try to read the note here, okay? Okay, try to read the notes. It is just a simple note which consists of 10 slides, because I don't really prefer to give my students with notes that are very cumbersome, meaning to say maybe notes with many pages. So it is so stressful to read. So normally I will give you like 10 to 15 slides, because my philosophy is when you want to give a lecture for 10 minutes, for 1 hour, so your lecture slides should be around 15 to 20 slides. Okay, because whenever we explain something, then it might take like 5 minutes, 5 to 6 minutes for a single slide. So that is my pace. Maybe you can use the same trick for your future presentation. So you yourself, you try to evaluate yourself whether how many minutes will you spend for a single slide. Maybe for me, normally I will spend like 6 to 7 minutes for a single slide. So you have to do the division. You have to divide 60 minutes with 7 minutes. So and then you count how many slides do you need. Okay. And then I'll cover the format string on Friday, okay? So of course you can print numbers, but maybe you want to print your numbers with 3 decimal places, or maybe you want to print with a specific width, specific width. I mean, the size of your number should be specific, or maybe you want to have 7 decimal places, or maybe you want to print your number as in scientific form, okay, times 10 to the power of something. That's the scientific form. So that's the idea. So I'll teach you in details on this coming Friday. So we will do face-to-face class on Friday, and we will begin at 2:45. So any final questions?